Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer quick match gameplay. This time around I am playing as the Empire against the Vampire Counts, led by Vash85 on the map The Lost Idols, and I am trying out a bit of a different build here. So we'll see how it kind of breaks down in actual practice. So right off the bat, you can see that I had a lot of Free Company Militia in my army, and why is that? Well, I'm trying to do a Vanguard build with Empire. And Empire, as far as factions in this game go, is probably one of the worst factions to attempt a Vanguard build with, because their only Vanguard capable units are their skirmish cavalry and their Free Company Militia. Everything else is normal deployment. That's definitely a bit restrictive. It's just like Empire doesn't have much in the way of stalking units, it also doesn't have much in the way of Vanguard units. So, regardless, I realized that with the fact that none of my heroes or lords can Vanguard deploy, I need to have them on flying mounts so they can reach the fight as soon as possible. So I've got Boris Todbringer over here on a Griffin, and of course he's coming in with the Midland Runefang for the regen, Crush the Weak for those AoE debuffs, Foe Seeker, Deadly Onslaught, and of course Stand Your Ground to help hold the front once he gets there. And alongside him is a Jade Wizard, definitely a very strong pick nowadays. Mounted on Pegasus to give him extra mobility. Coming in with Earthblood, as well as Dwellers Below. Dwellers Below in the current meta and state of things is really, really powerful. It's basically a must-pick if you're running Lore of Life. Unless it gets significantly nerfed, it's a very, very strong spell. And there's not really too much of a way to counter it or anything like that. So it's a very, very strong spell right now. The only thing you can really do is try not to clump up if your opponent's fielding it. So for my army, it's practically all Free Company Militia. 12 units of them to be exact. They're staggered out here, you can see in this kind of checkerboard pattern, so that they can provide mutual fire support without all getting bogged down in melee at the same time. This way the back lines can kind of provide support to the front, and same with the line all the way in the back. In the very back, I do have the Regiment of Renown, Sterling's Revenge, which has armor-piercing damage and immunity to psychology. These guys will do ridiculous amounts of damage over if they're allowed to keep firing, although they're not terrible melee combatants, and I do plan to use them kind of in a backline capacity just to support the front line. And I'm keeping them here in the back so they have the lowest chance of being shut down by zombies or by enemy monsters or cavalry or any sort of stuff like that. Free Company Militia is, of course, a decent melee combatant. Technically they're close quarters infantry. They have very high because they have 90 models rather than 68, despite the fact their missile damage is pretty low. They actually have very high DPS on a unit basis. And against squishy units, whether those be monsters like crypt horrors or skeletons, zombies, that sort of stuff, they will absolutely annihilate them with ranged fire if they, in fact. The main problem is against armored units, but vampires don't have too many of them. The main armored vampire unit is Graveguard, the other being Black Knights and Blood Knights. And that's kind of what the Sterling's Revenge is here for. Also, my other counter to enemy armor is really these Outriders with grenade launchers. I brought 2 units of them. Of course, these guys can also Vanguard deploy. Most importantly, they don't need, unlike normal Outriders with their flat fire trajectories, these guys don't have to be out on the flanks to be doing damage. They can easily just hide behind the front line of Free Company and lob grenades over their heads. And for most part, they won't do friendly fire, and they can absolutely tear through armored, even though it doesn't say so on their missile damage. They actually do 14 explosive armor piercing. Undead tend to clump up a lot. And oftentimes they even try to clump up because they're trying to maximize the use of Invocation of the Heck, and for that these grenades will be perfect. My final unit is the Zintler's Reichsguard, and the third thing is Zintler's Reichsguard is the only non-ranged unit Empire can Vanguard deploy. These guys are basically just normal Reichsguard with Vanguard deploy and immunity to psychology. Of course, they are veteran C9, so they can actually fight. Their stats are very high, even compared to Reichsguard. And Empire Cavalry, due to its very high armor and actual reasonable melee defense, can actually hold the line fairly effectively. So I'm kind of hoping to use these guys to support my front line, possibly absorb some enemy attacks, tie down enemy large units that could otherwise run havoc in my back line, and that sort of stuff with the Zintler's Reichsguard. In the meantime, though, my opponent is running a pretty, I think, in some ways, standard Empire or Vampire build. His lord is Heinrich Kemmler, coming in with Invocation of Nehek, Raise Dead, and Wind of Death, which is an interesting choice in Heinrich because he's very slow. It's kind of hard to make use of Wind of Death. alongside him, and of course he does have Stand Your Ground and Krell, of course does cause terror, which could be a problem because most of my army is susceptible to psychology, and he can definitely put the hurt down on enemy lords and heroes if you can come to grips with them. Alongside him is a Necromancer, basically just there to provide even more AoE regen, because of course Kemmler provides AoE regen for all units. Necromancer also does the same thing, also coming in with Invocation of Nehek and Raise Dead, so definitely zombie spam is a potential thing here. And then finally, because that wasn't enough regen, there's also an Unholy Corpse Cart with an Unholy Lodestone, which means even more regen, and of course Vigor Mortis, which will improve the combat stats of the Graveguard, which are otherwise fairly lackluster. There's also Vargulf back here, which can kind of dive into my backline and go after high priority targets or fight heroes, that sort of stuff. My opponent's front line is composed entirely of Graveguard, 5 units of them. One of the unit here in the center is the Stearnsmen, and given that they have very high armor and very solid shields, the fact that these guys have regen actually means that they're going to be able to heal through quite a bit of the damage that Free Company is doing, unless I focus them very heavily. And that's honestly just going to be a problem in general for me if I'm dealing with Graveguard. Because of the regen that Heinrich Kemmler, the Necromancer, and Corpse Cart with an Unholy Lodestone provide, this Graveguard will be very tanky and very hard for my fairly low damage output infantry to be dealing with. Along the flank, he does have Varix Reavers, Regiment of Renown, Black Knights with Lances and Barding, and these guys have regen as well. So basically, nearly all of my opponent's army has regen. I don't have any fire damage, so I have nothing to really capitalize on the fact that he brought so much regening units, so many regening units. And these guys have very high armor. They're like a weaker Reichsguard, really, but they do have that regen, so they'll be able to kind of keep cycle charging in and out and dealing with my Free Company. As you can see, I'm already pivoting my army to the side here. My opponent does have 2 units of Fellbats. These guys would normally be pretty good at shutting down some Empire range units, but in this case, where I brought so much range, I don't think they're going to be too useful. We'll definitely see how they break down, or how they do. And then over here on the flank, we do have 2 Black Coaches, and these guys, I think, are a bit of an iffy pick against Empire, because they are fairly cheap. And if they can stay in combat for a long period of time, then Unholy Vigor kicks in, Black Nimbus kicks in, Black Slice kick in, and they will be doing ridiculous amounts of damage and be very survivable. But if that does not happen, these guys are practically guaranteed to get annihilated. They do cause terror, however, so if they get into my backlines, just start rampaging through my Free Company, they could definitely cause a lot of hurt. I actually didn't notice them at the beginning, and that's definitely going to be a problem for me as they try to get into my backline. So anyway, you can see I'm kind of feinting over here with the Zimpler's Reichsguard, pretending to be going after the Graveguard. I don't intend to simply plow into them because there's Graveguard nearby to reinforce them. I don't want my Zimpler's Reichsguard getting bogged down. Now these Fellbats try to dive in a little too soon. My opponent should have probably waited and let the Graveguard tank some of the hits, and they get annihilated. Grenades coming down. This Graveguard over here has exposed its flank, trying to chase after the Reichsguard, and they are taking heavy fire from the Free Company. The Free Company is just laying down quite a bit of hurt. Over here you can see Zimpler's Reichsguard does get a charge off. These guys are down to about 2/3 of their HP. Some of the fire is going to the Stearnsmen, who are regenning through a lot of it. The grenades are coming down from the Outriders, doing even more damage. And this Vargulf does charge into the Reichsguard, but only takes off 1 model before these guys run away. And now they're engaging on the Black Coaches. I'm trying to bog these guys down and prevent them from really getting to my backline. Over here you can see I am casting a Dwellers Below. I did throw Boris into the fray. He is definitely helping beat up these Fellbats that would otherwise cause me a bit of hurt. I push the Free Company forward, and you can see Dwellers Below coming down over here, absolutely annihilating my own Free Company militia, as well as the Graveguard and the Stearnsmen. Over here I'm tying down the Varix Reavers with my own Free Company, just doing their best there. Stand your ground has gone down, so these guys should hold fairly well. My opponent did cast an Invocation of Nehek here to counteract the Dwellers Below. But Dwellers Below is actually fairly cost efficient. It doesn't cost too much more than an Invocation of Nehek. Over here you can see I threw Boris in there to time down. Grenades are still going down. I shuffled the Outriders over so they could stay firing on the Graveguard, and now when they're clumped up around Boris, this is kind of the perfect situation for them. These guys can just lob grenades in there and just annihilate these guys. Over here, the Free Company militia is slowly getting overrun by the Graveguard, but my opponent is having to kind of commit an inordinate amount of resources to it, which is really not good for him. Over here, unfortunately, my Sterling's Revenge is about to get attacked by Graveguard. I'm going to be forced to pull him back. You can see the grenades still flying in. The Free Company militia is tying down this Vargulf. Vargulfs are not great at dealing with mobs. Their damage output is kind of low to deal with those sorts of units. So you can see while he is slowly but surely taking apart the Free Company, he's not doing it too quickly. And over here, Heinrich Kemmler is being dove upon by Boris Todbringer. In the meantime, the Reichsguard has finally wiped out my opponent's Black Coach, or one of them. This Black Coach over here is slowly but surely getting shot up, and now I've managed to pull Sterling's Revenge away, and they'll be able to kind of wail on this Graveguard over here. This Free Company is uninterrupted, and you can see whenever my Free Company is being unhindered, they're simply just pouring fire into my opponent's line. If my opponent doesn't engage to shut them down, they're just capable of just laying down the smack. The hurt on my opponent, units. Over here, the Stearnsmen are actually still have a fairly high model count in spite of everything, but they are slowly but surely getting beaten up. They are in critical binding. Hopefully they'll soon start disintegrating, and that will help undo whatever little regen they have. And you can see these guys, despite having 20 models, they're definitely falling apart. This other unit of Graveguard over here is kind of standing still, while the Free Company of Militia is just holding them in place for the Outriders to dish damage out to. Over here, Boris has been bogged down by zombies, but I'm going to try to force bath him through, go after good old Kemmler. One of the things that I would definitely recommend if you run Kemmler is to run the Cloak of Mist and Shadows. This gives you an 80% physical resistance for a short amount of time, and this can be a great lifesaver for Heinrich when he's being assaulted by enemy heroes. You can see the grenades still flying in, trying to clear the zombies and Graveguard off of Boris, who is now pushing through. The corpse cart has practically fallen apart, you can see over here the grenade launchers are coming into the flanks of these Graveguards. The Free Company is going to be freed up, and that means they're going to be able to either fire on Krell or fire upon the Vargulf. Boris is pushed onward, going after Heinrich Kemmler over here. Graveguard falling apart. Sternsmen are practically dead, though you can see the guys are still tanking pretty well, even into the end game here. Free Company here getting pretty beat up, especially by their own grenades. Varix Reavers do push through. They're trying to get into my kind of backline. You can see this is a little too compact. I should have tried to separate things a little bit more. But even the Varix Reavers, despite their high armor and all that, are not quite able to... They don't do enough damage, really, to bust through the Free Company. Over here you can see I finally assassinated Kemmler, and now I'm working on the Necromancer, who is disintegrating. And my opponent's army at this point is just falling apart. The only units sticking around are the zombies and and Krell and all that sort of stuff. You can see I still have several pretty healthy. Sterling's Revenge is practically at full HP. Still had several pretty healthy units, and you can see that here in the end screen. So definitely my opponent got some very solid use out of the Graveguard, which will trade very effectively against Free Company Militia. Free Company are basically weaker swordsmen with pistols when it comes down to it, when you kind of break it down. Zintler's Reichsguard did amazing amounts of work. Most of this was trashing Graveguard, and they also picked off some of the large models, so definitely a great job from them. Boris, of course, dove in, helped shut down those bats and all that sort of stuff. Some of the Free Company actually raked in decent amounts of kills. Sterling's Revenge didn't get too much. They did help pick apart some of the Graveguard, though, and I do believe they helped pick apart the Corpse Cart, which is definitely a big win. My opponent, I think, committed the bats a little too soon, but regardless, bats are not amazing against Free Company because their attack is fairly low. Free Company is decent melee defense stats and definitely capable of dishing out the hurt in return, and there's a lot more of them. I definitely think part of the problem there was that my opponent allowed Heinrich to get assassinated. One of the best ways, like I said, to prevent that is to bring Cloak of Mist and Shadows, because unless your opponent has, I do believe it might just be a physical resist, but most armies don't have magic damage on their lords, so it can make Heinrich much more survivable. But yeah, Vargulf got some work done. Some of the Graveguard did good work. Sternsman got practically nothing done. The Free Company was actually holding fairly well. Some of these units you can see got practically massacred to man. These were the guys I dropped the Dwellers Below on. That's something. Those are some kill stats that are kind of hidden here. What the Dwellers Below did and that sort of stuff. And then of course units once they start disintegrating, those kills don't get credited to any units. I wish I could see how much damage the Outriders had done, because despite the kills, they were definitely disrupting and really messing up the Graveguard. But you can see one of the other big problems is the black coaches here. If my opponent had, for example, brought 2 more units of Black Knights, or another unit of, or 2 units of Skeletons, and say a unit of Blood Knights, something like that, I'm fairly sure they would have gotten more value out of that than the black coaches. Still, cool to see him attempted to be used against Empire, because that's always a bit of a risk. So definitely a bit interesting. I definitely enjoy this build. Once again, I wouldn't say this is necessarily a competitive build, but if you really want to be winning consistently, but I think situationally against a faction like Vampire Counts, or against a faction that can't necessarily get into your backline that easily, I think it's very solid and very fun to play around with. So yeah, good game to my opponent. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about Quick Match gameplay or Total War Warhammer in general, anything like that, be sure to post those down in the comments and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, I appreciate you all for watching, and Wyvern out.